Good evening. Can everybody hear me all right? Fantastic. I did the obligatory mic check. So I want to begin, of course, by thanking Mayor Bai and the selection committee for inviting me to give this lecture tonight. Thank you to Dr. Zajonc, Arthur, for the body of work that you have put forth in laying the pavement, allowing us to maybe not easily follow behind you, but still laying a pathway to make it a bit easier. I have to thank my family, my wife, Alexandra, for joining me on this trip this weekend, or this week. I have to thank my mother and father for taking care of our sons, Mateo and Lucas, while we're here. And I have to thank all of you for honoring me, honoring all of us with your presence here this evening. I'm very excited to be able to spend this time with you all. So one thing that I have to get out of the way is I have no intention whatsoever to lecture you. It's not going to happen. One thing is, I am not a lecturer. Any of the students that have taken a class with me, even those who've taken statistics with me, perhaps especially those who've taken statistics with me, they would tell you that I have no interest whatsoever in lecturing. My sons most likely would hear this and say, "Come on, Dad. You just got finished lecturing us before we left to go spend the weekend with Gammy and Papa. You lecture us all the time." Now, obviously their voices aren't that deep. They're only 8 and 6. But in my role and privilege as their dad, I got to lecture them at least a little tiny bit. But again, I have no intention on doing that. When I say that I'm not a lecturer, I reflect back on something one of my mentors, Dr. Cleopatra Caldwell, once said to me as a postdoc. I was looking for a faculty position, and she asked me, "Have you gone through all of this training to become lecturer, Lenwood Hayman? Or have you been preparing to become professor, Lenwood Hayman?" Now, as Professor Hayman, I see that the narrative associated with being a professor, particularly in this black male body, is not something that fits for me. It isn't engaging enough for me. There's a finality in the title of professor that suggests that I should be held in high regard because of my title. Because of the narrative associated with this title, I need to be able to skillfully profess to all who will listen that my knowledge on a specific topic is vast and that my expertise on this topic is great. I found this particular narrative to be incredibly boring and, quite honestly, masturbatory, as it is exclusionary, if not, it's exclusionary and certainly not inclusive. It's closed-minded, it's self-serving, and it is one-sided. Now, both of the scholars in the 2 previous AZ lectures, Paul Wapner and Vita Goler, used this quote by Howard Thurman in their talks. And if you haven't watched their talks, I really encourage you to do so. So I will intentionally shift the trend into a pattern now and repeat it again tonight. Howard Thurman said, "Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive, and then go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive." Whew. Having learned the significance of coming together, I now see myself as being more of a facilitator, a trainer, encouraging beings to come together in community. This is what makes me come alive. Asking questions, learning, loving, quite literally gives me life. I ask questions. I provide a lens through which to obtain answers to said questions, and I wish you well on your journey to obtaining your answers. But because of my community building focus, I implore you either to work with me in obtaining answers to the questions or to reconvene so that we can discuss what we've learned while we were apart from each other. Community. In other words, I invite you to be a colleague, not a pupil, so that we can learn together. So again, this is not a lecture. My intention is to ask you what I see as critical questions. My intention is to challenge each of you to seek out the answers and then to report back and share with the group. I'll tell you now that it's going to get a little bit uncomfortable if it hasn't already. The questions I have and the challenges I will pose are intended to stretch, engage, and hold, but it is possible that some of you will feel more secure in shrinking, disengaging, and letting go. I get it. So let this serve right now as the trigger warning. And if you need to take care of yourself at any point, I implore you to do just that. This is not me giving you quote unquote permission to take care of yourself. It is me asking, suggesting, inviting you to benefit the community in taking care of yourself this evening. Now, before I get into it, I want to take us through a practice intended to invoke collegiality and community. So, if you will be so kind, I invite you all to settle into your seat. Free your hands, free your minds as much as you can. Invitation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read a series of phrases. My invitation is to have you all repeat said phrases to yourself in your mind. All right? Again, this is an invitation. So as we take in a deep cleansing breath just to help us settle even deeper. Again, repeating to yourself the following phrases. May I recognize that I am here, present, and occupying this space. May I recognize that I am healed and healthy enough to be here, occupying this space. May I recognize that I am whole and complete in occupying this space. May I recognize that I am worthy, I am at home, and I am safe here occupying this space. May you recognize that you are here, present, and occupying this space. May you recognize that you are healed and healthy enough to be here, occupying this space. May you recognize that you are whole and complete in occupying this space. May you recognize that you are worthy, you are at home, and you are safe right here in occupying this space. May we recognize that we are here, present, and sharing this space. May we recognize that we are healed and healthy enough to be here sharing this space. May we recognize that we are whole and complete as we share this space. May we recognize that we are worthy, we are at home, and we are safe right here with each other, sharing this space. And as we sit and hold those affirmations, I invite you again to take a deep cleansing breath. And come back to meet us in this space. In March, I was diagnosed with general anxiety disorder. It was not necessarily surprising. I had been feeling it, something, in my body for quite some time. So when I finally had the courage enough to break the narrative and go and see a therapist and sit with him and share with him and learn from him and with him, it was invigorating, it was liberating. But it was just the beginning of the journey. At March of this year, 2019. New journey all over again, even before we started to move. Now, we knew that the move was going to take place about a year in advance. There were several things that happened. So it was beneficial, and it was also incredibly stressful because there was this long, drawn-out period of the move is coming, the move is coming, the move is coming, the move is coming, get ready. And so naturally, with all of the requirements of being a husband, a partner, a father, a brother, a friend, a loved one, a professor, adding that onto the new expectations, it was a lot. Holy cow, it was a lot. And again, so when I learned what was going on, when I had an idea, when I had a sense of what was going on, it was spot on. I mean, really the most pressing challenge came with determining which of the myriad narratives about me, or beings that look like me, which of those narratives I was leaning toward, and how this lean served me, or obviously how it did not serve me. My practice helped me to learn to pay close attention to my position, how I occupy space, and how I interact with beings with whom I share the space. With my practice, or what my practice has helped me to realize is narratives, or rather our ability to tell narratives, is one of, if not the most significant aspects to our humanity. We are uniquely privileged, more so than any being on the planet, to craft stories and then to share them, to communicate them, right? So what does this mean? Well, according to Blue Cross and Blue Shield, their National Health Index, the quality of life based on health outcomes for everyone in the United States is about 91.2%. This means that on average, we, the residents of the United States, are living 8.8% beneath our optimal health. The quality of health the quality of our health is almost 9% less than what it could and for all intents and purposes should be. In other words, we as a body on average are suffering. Breaking news. And this is just here in this is not just here in the United States, right? Let alone what's happening worldwide. These stats, I should say, are from the United States, are based on the United States. Now, I know that 8.8% may not sound like much, but how many of you, by show of hands, and folks at home, wherever you're watching this, please feel free to raise your hands as well. How many of you would be grateful to weigh 8.8% less than you currently weigh? Look, right? Or how many of you, again, by show of hands, will be grateful to be 8.8% taller? Inches taller? What? How many of you, here it is, watch this. How many of you, some of y'all ain't raising your hands, I'm paying attention, I'm watching, but I bet you all of y'all about to raise your hands. How many of you would like to receive an 8.8% raise in your salary? Hello, right? So this becomes especially interesting when we consider that there are 10 health conditions, this 8.8%, 10 health conditions accounting for this 8.8% reduction in quality of life, with the top 3 being hypertension, major depression, and high cholesterol, as you can see. All right? And although there are some genetic predispositions that increase the risk of certain populations suffering from these conditions, extensive research supports that social determinants of health are the major contributing factors. Social determinants of health. The World Health Organization's Commission on the Social Determinants of Health has defined them as the conditions in which people are born, grow, live, work, and age. The primary vehicle that drives the influence of the social determinants of health is stress. Again, surprise, surprise, right? In other words, the stress associated with the conditions in which we are born, grow, live, work, and age are the fundamental drivers of this less than optimal quality of life. Based on where we are born, where we grow up, where we live, and where we work, the labels we are given and those we select for ourselves are weaponized against us to negatively impact our health. This happens disproportionately more frequently amongst those of us marginalized because of our labels. Let me not go there yet. Plainly, some of us experience a disproportionately worse quality of life primarily because of the incomplete narratives associated with our labels. Now, the point of me showing you this slide, I show it the first day of class when I teach social determinants of health. The point of this slide is to illustrate this is not an or the exhaustive list. I exhausted myself coming up with this list. And some of the students that take classes with me contributed as well. As well as 2 years ago when I led the workshop, I incorporated this slide and some kind folk, Brother Marlon being one of them, pointed out, hey man, you forgot one, add this. I was like, all right, cool, I'm gonna put that in there. These are some of the ways that we are marginalized, right? Our answers, how we answer each of these categories influences our health outcomes. Are you serious? Yeah, I'm serious. I talk to myself, right? How we answer categories is making us sick. Social determinants of health. We are force-fed these incomplete narratives even before we're born via hormones transmitted to us from our mother, which allege that certain beings and spaces are inferior and subject to our conquering, rather than compassionately contemplated and cared for. What might the world look like if we chose an open first, compassionately curious lean in to new sources of information rather than a closed-minded capitalistic curiosity where we lean on our focal beings until they are crushed under the weight of our fixation to categorize and then dismiss them? What would it look like? Violence, according to the World Health Organization, is the intentional, and I put intentional in quotes and I'll explain what I mean in a minute, the intentional use of physical force or power, threatened or actual, against oneself, another being, or against a group or community, which either results in or has a high likelihood of resulting in injury, death, psychological harm, maldevelopment, or deprivation. And I put intention in air quotes because intention, and actual quotes here. Because intention, it's okay to laugh, it's all right, has historically been regarded as the primary determinant in terms of qualifying an action or speech as violent. Intention, right? But who is asked about intention? The oppressor. Certainly not the victim. Because when we ask the victim, when we take a trauma-informed lens, when we ask the victim if what happened was psychologically harmful, painful, encourages maldevelopment, deprives us from access to X, Y, and or Z, if we ask the victim, the traumatized, they will most certainly say, I don't know what the cat's intention was, but sure felt like violence to me. Sure felt like violence to me. One of my favorite scenes from one of my favorite movies, Coming to America. You know I had to do it. My wife just, oh God. Eddie Murphy playing the role of Clarence the Barber in My T. Sharp Barbershop elucidates the moment when he haphazardly was introduced to Martin Luther King Jr. And what he says is, I was walking down the street, minding my own business. I go around the corner, next thing I know, I run into somebody, they punch me in the face, knock me down on the floor. I look up and I say, Dr. King, you hit me in the face. Dr. King said, oh, thought you were somebody else. And he walks off. the gentleman, the other characters that Eddie Murphy was playing in the movie, swore down, no, you did not meet Martin Luther King. And he goes, yes, I did. No, you did not. Yes, I did. No, you didn't. Right? It's a fantastic scene. One of my favorite movies, all-time favorite movies. But the reason that I mention it is because to Clarence, Martin Luther King Jr., regardless of his intention, committed violence against him. The perception was Martin Luther King Jr. was this incredibly peaceful, passive guy. And so the absurdity of him punching him to the ground, right, encouraged the other folks that were in the barbershop. One of them, a very young Cuba Gooding Jr., right? I don't know if y'all knew that, but very, very young Cuba Gooding Jr. Encouraged the people in the barbershop to call bullcrap. I'm doing my best not to cuss. I don't curse, I cuss. I'm from the country, so I don't curse, I cuss. It was very difficult for them to believe this narrative because it was in direct contradiction to the narrative that had already been established on a national level about this particular individual, right? So again, there was no care, there was no regard for poor Clarence getting knocked out on the street. He was just minding his business, right? But anyway, in considering the frequency and ferocity of the incomplete narratives we are fed, it may be helpful for me to call them what we've called them historically, stereotypes. Stereotypes in and of themselves are harmful right? Stereotypes in and of themselves are harmful. But the violence comes when we rely on those stereotypes as we interact with the beings with whom we share space. Now, stereotypes are true. What? I know this brother did not just say in front of all these people the stereotypes. Stereotypes are true. Stereotypes are not completely true. Stereotypes are partial truths. Stereotypes are incomplete narratives. Stereotypes are incomplete narratives, and these incomplete narratives are increasingly dangerous, particularly because of how easily violence is dispersed in today's day and age. I'll use the word mediated to further contextualize it in 2019. Incomplete narratives are particularly dangerous and harmful when such violence is mediated. Put differently, when violence is broadcast across multiple networks into our smartphones, our televisions, our watches, or any other connected device, it immediately becomes a threat to public health, as evidence suggests how damaging the perpetuation of violent narratives are to certain populations. Social disorganization theory was developed in studies of urban crime by sociologists Clifford Shaw and Henry McKay. What this theory alleges is that social disorganization takes place when there is a breakdown of collective norms, as well as a breakdown in how these collective norms are communicated. When I say collective norms, I mean narratives that assist the collective, that assist the community. The collective norms and the processes, the means by which these norms are communicated. Social disorganization is the wall that comes between the communities, cutting them off from the resources that they need. Partially based on, I'll say partially, almost totally based on incomplete narratives. Subsequent studies have found that crime and deviance are not randomly distributed. They are not randomly distributed, but are linked to populations, may you be well, holding incomplete narratives, which historically wall them off from receiving the support that they need. I just said that. This past Sunday, on August 4th, 2019, on MSNBC's Deadline, White House, Professor Eddie Glaude of Princeton University brilliantly pointed out how the United States has come to embody social disorganization theory. And rather than me attempting to paraphrase what he said, it's only 3 minutes, I'm gonna play it for you.
You know, America's not unique in its sins as a country. We're not unique in our evils, to be honest with you. I think where we may be singular is our refusal to acknowledge them. And the legends and myths we tell about our inherent, goodness to hide and cover and conceal so that we can maintain a kind of willful ignorance that protects our innocence. See, the thing is that when the Tea Party was happening, we were saying, pundits, oh, it's just about economic populism. It's not about race. When people knew, social scientists were already writing that what was driving the Tea Party were anxieties about demographic shifts, that the country was changing, that they were seeing these racially ambiguous babies on Cheerios commercials, that the country wasn't quite feeling like it was a white nation anymore. And people were screaming from the top of their lungs, this is not just simply economic populism. This is the ugly underbelly of the country. See, the thing is this, and I'll say this and I'll take the hit on it. There are communities that have had to bear the brunt of white Americans confronting the danger of their innocence. And it happens every generation. So somehow we have to kind of, oh my God, is this who we are? And just again, here's another generation of babies. Think about it, a 2-year-old had his bones broken by 2 parents trying to shield him from being killed. A woman who has been married to this man for as long as I've been on the planet almost, lost her husband. For what? And so what we know is that the country has been playing politics for a long time on this hatred. We know this. So it's easy for us to place it all on Donald Trump's shoulders. It's easy for us to place Pittsburgh on his shoulders. It's easy for me to place Charlottesville on his shoulders. It's easy for us to place El Paso on his shoulders. This is us. And if we're going to get past this, we can't blame it on him. He's a manifestation of the ugliness that's in us. I've had the privilege of growing up in a tradition that didn't believe in the myths and the legends because we had to bear the brunt of them. Either we're going to change, Nicole, or we're going to do this again and again, and babies are going to have to grow up without mothers and fathers, uncles and aunts, friends, while we're trying to convince white folk to finally leave behind a history that will maybe, or embrace a history that might set them free from being white. Finally.
What else?
Lord help us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out.
Are we uncomfortable yet? Now again, I want to reiterate the importance of you taking care of yourself, because I am about to go a bit deeper. So come along at your own risk. As Professor Glaude points out, violence is a consistent part of United States history. The narrative of violence has always been told and perpetuated, and it's just that now we are seeing it more and more often. The violence is now mediated. Mediated violence is contributing, not simply causing, but contributing to the social disorganization we are experiencing, and it is contributing to the 8.8% reduction in our collective quality of life. In our collective quality of life. As a country, not as black people or brown people or white people, but as a country. As a collective. And to further illustrate my point of just how mediated violence is, I've prepared a brief video to demonstrate how what I see as violence, as it has been captured over the last 4 or 5 years or so. Now, the challenge, should you choose to accept it, is to sit with these images in all of their violent splendor and to practice paying close attention not only to how you feel as you view these images, but also pay attention to where you feel it and to make note of it. If you need to take something out so that you can make note of it, I invite you to do so. Pay attention to what you are feeling and where on your person you feel it. Does it manifest in a specific region of your body and then shift to other areas? Or does it stay put? This is a challenge, but again, it's an invitation. So take care of yourself, all right? as I look at these violent images, and as I am keenly aware of what I am feeling and where on my body I am feeling it, I am reminded of how important it is for me, personally, to have a practice in which I can engage so that I can ground myself. I recall mentioning to a loved one back in November, over at the High Horse in Amherst, that it is of the utmost importance for me to remain connected to music. I mentioned that it is of the utmost importance for me if I am to continue in this line of work, of living, of simply existing in this body, in these spaces, I must keep a song on my heart. And so back in the spring, when I first got the email from Mirabai asking me to do this tonight, and as I was trying to figure out how, amidst the transition and shifts and difficulties and challenges I knew would be starting to show up around this time, one of the songs on my heart at the time started playing in my subconscious. And although I did not yet know all of the words, I knew the refrain, and that was enough to convince me to say yes to doing this. As I look at these images, those words of Steve Winwood, Will Jennings, Eric Clapton, and Shaka Khan come to mind, and I cannot help but consider the existence of a higher love. Specifically, they ask us to think about it. There must be a higher love down in our hearts or somewhere in the stars above. Without it, life is wasted time. Look inside your heart, I've looked inside mine. Things look so bad everywhere. In this whole world, what is fair? We walk blind and we try to see, falling behind in what could be. Bring me a higher love. Bring me a higher love. Oh, bring me a higher love. Where's that higher love? I keep thinking of worlds are turning and we're just hanging on, facing our fears or standing out there alone, a yearning. And it's clear to me there must be someone who's feeling for me. Things look so bad everywhere. In this whole world, what is fair? We walk blind and we try to see, falling behind in what could be. Bring me a higher love. Bring me a higher love. Oh, bring me a higher love. What's that higher love I keep thinking of? I will wait for it. We're not too late for it. Until then, I'll sing my song to cheer the night along. I can light the night up with my soul on fire. I can make the sunshine from pure desire. Let me feel the love come over me. Let me feel how strong it can be. Oh, bring me a higher love. I said, bring me a higher love. Whoa. oh, bring me higher love. Where's that higher love that I'm thinking of? Where's that higher love that I'm singing of? This is that higher love I keep thinking of. The challenge in coming up with an operationalization of higher love. That was the challenge. How do I operationalize it? Operational definition. What's a useful definition? How can we use it? How can we not just talk about it in these lofty and loving and escaping terms? What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? Where do I go to find it? As I sat with these questions, again, amidst all the shifts and uprooting that's been present in my life for the last year, the answer came to me. This higher love looks like me in the smiles and jubilation on the faces of my loved ones. This higher love sounds like laughter and joy. This higher love feels like safety and acceptance. And to find this love, I go home. And as I mentioned in the practice when we first began tonight, home is not necessarily a place, or at least a singular place, right? Home is where you feel safe enough to make it. That's home. For 1 week at the end of each of the last 4 summers now, Northampton has been home for me. And it's not because of all of the signage letting me know that some of the people around here believe that my life matters. But because of the loved ones I've met while I'm here. In other words, I feel safe enough to call this place home because this is one of the spaces in which my beloved community convenes. And so when I speak of radical love in my title, this is the type of love to which I am referring. Beloved community. In public health research, we refer to it as community cohesiveness or social cohesion. What is radical about beloved community? Well, when I speak of, in consulting the definition, I should say, of radical, we see that radical means root, a basic principle, a foundational aspect. In regards to change or action, radical relates to or affects the fundamental nature of something. It is far-reaching or thorough. So when I speak of radical love, I am speaking of root love, foundational love, the love that has the power to change the fundamental nature of society. While holding this belief in the power of love, again, that it has the power to change the fundamental nature of society, I created a formula to demonstrate my particular operational definition of beloved community. And so when I speak of beloved community, I am referring to the ratio of multidimensional love, which is the product of love of self, love of all beings, and love of shared space environment. The ratio of this multidimensional love and temporal consistency, which is the product of change in time. This is what it looks like. Bless you, may you be well. Love of self multiplied by love of all beings, multiplied by the love of shared space and environment, divided by the product of temporal consistency. What is the only thing in life that is consistent? Change. Temporal consistency equals beloved community. How can you be in beloved community if you don't first love yourself well enough to know that you have a community, or to know that you deserve to be in community where people actually love you and you let them and they let you love them? How? So this love of self, I propose, is the most critical aspect to this formula, the singular most critical aspect to this formula, because as difficult and complicated as this formula is to live, right, to exist, to dwell in beloved community with other people in spaces that you share with other people, not even only with other people, but with other beings with whom you share space, right? Thank you. With whom you share space over time as change occurs, it's not as simple as I have it depicted here. But yet it is. This is the lens. How we wear it is as follows. If we consider love to be the practice of understanding, if, not telling you to, but just go with me for a little bit. If we consider love as the practice of understanding the focal being, the focal object, whatever it is that we're paying attention to, if we consider love as the process of seeking understanding, of practicing understanding, then it is crucial for each movement we make to be focused on the outcome of understanding our focal being. The first aspect of loving as a practice of seeking understanding is visual. The behavior is seeing. And because our intention is to understand, we see with the intention to observe the focal being. In efforts to understand, we lean in, being mindful not to lean on, as leaning on could create unintended pressure on the focal being. When we see something that interests us, that piques our curiosity, what do? When we see a flower that is particularly beautiful, we lean in. When we see words that are particularly interesting to us, those of us of a particular age put on glasses, and then we lean in. Depending on our level of compassionate curiosity, in other words, paying attention to both our personal responses as well as the responses of the focal being, we progress to the second aspect, which is to hear. Again, because our intention is to understand, we hear with the intention to listen to the focal being. In efforts to develop a deeper understanding, we lean in further. Seeing is not enough. Observing is not enough. We lean in to be able to listen, to hear. Once again, being mindful, being careful not to lean on. Leaning in and not leaning on so as to not increase the pressure felt by the focal being. We lean in, not on. Lastly, again, depending on our level of compassionate curiosity, we progress to the third and most difficult aspect of loving or practicing understanding, which is the tactile aspect, in which we touch with the intention to feel the focal being. In efforts to develop an even deeper understanding, we lean in further, maintaining an even larger awareness of the importance of leaning no farther into the focal being as the focal being is leaning into us. What? We lean in so that we can observe better and so that we can hear better and so that we can eventually feel, right? But we don't lean in any farther than the focal being is leaning into us, thus creating interdependence. Interdependence, where I am no more or less dependent on you and your welfare than you are on me. Interdependence. And the crowd goes wild. Oh, this is such a blessing. Woo. We can only progress through these three aspects via compassionate curiosity. Compassionate curiosity. Not just curiosity like, oh, wow, your hair looks so nice, can I touch it? No. Compassionate curiosity. You can just say that, wow, your hair is so beautiful, and just leave it at that. Just, if they say you want to touch it, there you go. Otherwise, that isn't leaning in, that's leaning on. It's called a microaggression. I don't have time to go over that right now. Now, as we reflect back on beloved community, at the core of community are the individuals that dwell therein. Love of self, love of all beings, love of shared space. Which is why I began the first practice by inviting us to first focus on the self. The self carries great importance in consideration of the beloved community, as it is the self, once again, that determines participation, depth, and duration. In other words, we can only participate in beloved community if we first and foremost love ourselves. Whew. Translating this back again into public health speak, specifically social psychological speak, if we operationally define love as social support, if we don't perceive that we have it, if we don't believe that we have it, then we do not receive the health benefits of someone who does perceive that they are socially supported. In other words, what you perceive is your reality. Some of us have been bombarded with narratives so long that it encourages us to believe that we are not worthy to receive support or love. For so long that we don't know how to exist in beloved community. We don't see a seat for ourselves. To counteract this destructive narrative, I developed a brief practice that I would like to take us through. This practice is based in large part, on the Just Like Me exercise, developed by Mirabai, and it can be found in her book with Daniel Barbazat entitled Contemplative Practices in Higher Education. I'm almost positive that Mirabai has a copy in her purse. Or there are copies outside. But anyway, whereas Mirabai's activity is designed to help practitioners make connections with the individuals with whom they sometimes share space, my take is intended to help practitioners connect to the being with whom they always share space, their self. So, in recognition of the time, I'm taking my time, I'm inviting you to engage in this practice. So, once again, position yourself as you need to. If you have a cell phone or some sort of device that has a front-facing camera on it, I invite you to take that out now and open up the selfie function. If you do not have a device, I don't know who you might be. If you do not have said device, or if you don't feel comfortable, with the image that you will see when you look at your device, I invite you to avert your gaze, to close your eyes, do what you need to do, and wrap your arms around yourself. If you can do both, God bless you. My yoga teacher's back there. She's like, yeah, I can do it. Look, watch. She just showed me. I can't do it for too long because this is the slim cut. This is not the athletic cut that has the Lycra in it. So I feel the seam of my jacket asking, come on, dog. But as you hold the focal being, I invite you to repeat to yourselves in your mind the following phrases. The being I am holding has a body and a mind. The being I am holding has feelings, emotions, and thoughts. The being I am holding has, in their life, experienced physical and emotional pain and suffering. The being I am holding has at some point been sad, disappointed, angry, and or hurt. The being I am holding has felt unworthy or inadequate. The being I am holding worries and is frightened sometimes. The being I am holding has longed for friendship and connection. The being I am holding is learning about life. The being I am holding wants to be caring and kind to others. The being I am holding is curious about and intrigued by the life they have been given. The being I am holding wishes to be free from pain and suffering. The being I am holding wishes to be safe and healthy. The being I am holding wishes to be happy. The being I am holding wishes to be loved. Now I invite you to take a deep, cleansing breath. As you invite feelings of compassion, wellness, joy, gratitude, and safety to arise right here, right now. And I invite you to will these feelings of well-being up from the earth or to accept them as they pour down from the skies, or to tune into the vibration of these feelings as they are omnipresent in this room. And as you acknowledge the presence of these feelings of well-being, I invite you to open yourselves to these feelings. And to facilitate this opening, I invite you to repeat in your mind the following phrases. I wish for the being I am holding to have the strength, the resources, and the social support to navigate the difficulties of their life with ease. I wish for the being I am holding to be free from pain and suffering. I wish for the being I am holding to be peaceful and happy. I wish for the being I am holding to be loved. I wish these things for the being I am holding because this being is alive, and this being is in this space, and this being is in this present moment, and because this is what this being needs. Now I invite you to conclude this practice by repeating in your mind the following phrase. I am grateful for the time I was able to spend holding my focal being. And once again, I invite you to take a deep cleansing breath as you transition back into this space. Don't let yourself go, though. Keep holding yourself in some way, shape, or form. Don't let yourself go. Oh, that's what this was called. This is what that was called, I should say. Forgot to progress the slide. But anyway, in summation, the public health significance of radical love, or the public health significance of the radical love of beloved community, is that according to a large body of evidence, quite expertly summarized in a recently published paper by Jingwang Zhang and Damon Santola in the Annual Review of Sociology, just came out, 2019, it has the power to promote positive health outcomes for the residents that dwell therein. Beloved community. Decades of evidence. Historically, however, I believe Martin Luther King Jr. said it best when he mentions, the end of the civil rights movement is reconciliation. The end is redemption. The end is the creation of the beloved community. It is this type of spirit and this type of love that can transform opposers into friends. It is this type of understanding goodwill that will transform the deep gloom of the old age into the exuberant gladness of the new age. It is this love which will bring about miracles in the heart of all beings. Clean back in 1956. Later, Dr. King expounds deeper upon the type of love he means. And he says, in speaking of love, we are not referring to some sentimental emotion. It would be nonsense to urge people to love their oppressors in an affectionate sense. Nonsense, pish posh. Instead, there are 3 words for love in the Greek New Testament. First, there's eros. In Platonic philosophy, eros meant the yearning of the soul for the realm of the divine. It has come now to mean a sort of romantic love. Second, there is philia, and it meant intimate affectionateness towards friends. When we speak of loving those who oppose us, we refer neither to eros or philia. We speak of a love which is expressed in the Greek word agape. Agape means nothing sentimental or affectionate. It means understanding, redeeming goodwill for everyone, an overflowing love which seeks nothing in return. I hear you. Thank you. I promise I didn't push a button to make that. That was awesome. In other words, love at its very best is provided. Love at its very best is provided as an offering. Not when it is provided as an investment. In other words, not with the expectation that it will be returned at some point in time when needed in an even grander gesture than it was initially given. Not an investment, an offering. When we are able to love so securely that we can sit down at the feet of the focal being and care not what happens to it afterwards, that we can sit the love at the feet of our focal being, just sit it there and not care what happens to it afterwards. We can just offer it. That is the higher love that I am dreaming of. Thank you for your time and attention. You all honor and humble me. I'm grateful, and may you all be well.